Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to do this more often. I am very happy to be here with you this afternoon. Thanks for coming to the reunion, and thanks for coming to this session in particular. We have a wonderful group of people I'll introduce you to in a second, but I always am happy to welcome home alumni. It's just really great to see you. So thank you. Thank you so much. Our panelists for this afternoon, we have to my immediate left, Rachel Feldman, who's Associate Provost and Director of Scholarship and Student Aid. Rachel's been with us for about a year now? Almost a year. She came to us from the University of California at Berkeley, and we're very happy to have her. Next, we have Dean Kevin Guskiewicz of the College of Arts and Sciences. And Kevin is, in addition to being Dean of the college, is also a professor in exercise and sports science. And finally, to my far left, we have Dr. Bruce Cairns, who is the current chair of the faculty, so the head of the faculty governance organization at UNC. And then he has a couple of day jobs. He is the John Stackhouse Distinguished Professor of Surgery and has a joint appointment in microbiology and immunology. And then is also the director of the North Carolina J.C. Burns Center, which is certainly a point of pride for the university and has really done amazing work for people across the country and literally across the world now. So I'm going to take a few minutes. So our topic today is preserving the greatness or the status of UNC as a great global public university. I'm going to show you a few slides just to give you kind of an orientation to some of the numbers and metrics that we look at to understand what are some of the elements of trying to be a great global public research university. And then I'll turn to each one of the panelists in order so they can talk a little bit about that question. And sort of in the big picture, what we're trying to talk about is what does it actually mean to be a great public university? What are some of the elements or dimensions that are associated with that? What are some of the challenges that we face? Because like in any organization that you've been in, there's challenges all the time to try and achieve competence and certainly excellence. And then what are some of the things we're doing to try and address those? So I'm going to start, and my presentation will be maybe 10 minutes, something like that. We'll go through the panelists, and then, as Catherine said, we'll have time for questions at the end. And Catherine, can you hear me okay in the back? Oh. Get closer to the mic. All right, that's why you ask. Thank you. So the problem now is I can't see the slides. All right.
Jim.
Bruce principals.
Oh, okay. That's all right. We've got these. So one of the things that great universities do is to help their students graduate. And so these are the graduation rates for the group that entered in 2008. And universities generally measure their graduation rate at 4 years and at 6 years. That's just sort of the convention that's used. And this slide, like several of the other slides that we'll show, shows not only our graduation rates, but also the graduation rates for a set of peer universities. So each university within the UNC system has a set of peer universities that were agreed upon with the overall university system, what we call general administration. And so it's mostly the top public universities in the country and a handful of private universities. And so you have here the 4-year and 6-year graduation rates. Because we are not able to update the other schools as quickly as we would like to, it's always a little bit behind. And so you see in the blue boxes up in the top what the most recent data is for the 4-year and the 6-year graduation rate. One way of really summarizing this is that these graduation rates are really strong. You see that some of the best private universities in the country are only a handful of percentage points ahead of us in terms of graduation rate. And it is something that we're very, very proud of. Having said that, we have launched a number of initiatives to try and get these numbers to be even higher. And while the overall graduation rate is extraordinarily high, for context, the national average for graduation rates at both 4 years and 6 years is roughly 50% of what our graduation rate is, just to give you some context for that, which I see some mouths open there. It is surprisingly low. I will certainly grant you that the many, many people who enter college don't graduate in 4 years or 6 years, or unfortunately ever. And so this really is a point of pride and really is a sign of the strength of UNC, not just as a public university, but as a university overall. So this is going to be sort of a quick tour of a number of elements of a university. So that one had to do with student success. This one has to do with research and development. And For those of you with a background in business, I always find that, as I do actually, I always find it ironic to brag about how high your expenditures are. But let me reassure you that expenditures really is a reflection of the amount of grants that you've been getting. And so one way to assess the impact of research in a university is the dollar volume of grants. And I won't bore you with the details, but expenditures is just a different way of counting grant dollars. And so once again, you see us in very strong shape relative to the other universities in our peer set. Almost all of the universities that are above us are private universities who have obviously quite a bit more money to invest in getting research up. But even with that, we do very, very well. We do particularly well, as you can see, in federally funded research with only 4 of the peer set in front of us, less well in business-sponsored research. And so that actually is something that we're working on to try and create broader and deeper partnerships with businesses to facilitate the research that we do. Since this is, after all, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I thought you might be interested in the economic impact of research. So where does that money go? What difference does it make? And so you'll see a lot of maps like this around the university. And one of the things that we can show here is what is the economic impact of research to North Carolina. And this is for the last fiscal year, 2016. So this is a map you've probably all seen in one version or another with the counties in North Carolina. And what it shows is the number of counties in which people are employed by research having to do with the University of North Carolina. And you can see that we've directly supported almost 10,000 individuals with a total payroll of almost $300 million. So research is actually a very big contributor. Now, what this doesn't count is actually organizations that have been built by people coming from the University of North Carolina, business organizations and startups and so on. We generally have on the order of between 10 and 15 startups a year that come from research at the University of North Carolina. If you counted those, the numbers would be much, much, much bigger. And it's interesting that all the jobs aren't just here in Orange County or next door in Durham County, but they're really spread out around the state. So one of the elements of being a public university that many people would immediately recognize is having relatively low tuition. And so I thought you might be interested in knowing what the tuition is for us. And we break tuition up into 4 categories, whether you're in-state or out-of-state, and whether you're graduate or undergraduate. And what this shows you is that our in-state tuition, whether you're talking about graduate students or particularly undergraduate students, is very, very low. The various boards we work with have decided that we should try to keep in-state tuition very low and that out-of-state tuition should be relatively market-based. And so you don't see heavy discounts to tuition for out-of-state students that you do for in-state students. And that's a complicated story. And actually, graduate tuition, whether in-state or out-of-state, is actually a complicated thing because we have different tuitions for different programs in different competitive markets. Whereas undergraduate tuition, we're competing. Most of you have probably had kids who have gone to college. You know what that's like in terms of a national comparison. So we do, in fact, have within our peer set the lowest undergraduate in-state tuition, and almost at any level. There are, I think, a handful of universities around the country of any size and reputation, whatsoever, that have tuition that's comparable to ours. Part of this is really coming from the original charter of the university and the state constitution that said that to the extent possible, tuition should be free. So certainly not free anymore, but the sense of it is we're asked to be in the lowest quartile of especially undergraduate resident tuition, and we're well within the lowest quartile. There's a lot of stories that you can read in various publications about student debt, and people will talk about the debt crisis. I know that when I was actually interviewing to be provost 4.5 years ago, I did some research on this and came to learn that undergraduate student debt at that point had just crossed, student debt as a whole, had just crossed $1 trillion. And it was the highest form of debt anywhere in the United States with the exception of mortgage debt. And the last number I saw was 1.3. I don't know, Rachel, do you track it? About right. About 1.3 trillion. You know, tenth of a trillion here, tenth of a trillion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. So nationally, it's a big story. And you hear stories about people that have $200,000 in debt and can't get a job. You don't find that many stories like that here. Our debt, and Rachel will probably talk a little bit more about this, our debt has remained, especially in constant dollars, relatively flat for the last number of years, and you can see that it's relatively modest. The array here on the chart is in terms of the percentage of students who borrow, so you should be careful to look at the actual average debt. And then if you're interested in breaking it out where the debt comes from, you can see that the federal sources. But as a parent of 2 children that have gone to college, I'm not sure that the actual where it comes from is as important as what's the number that you actually have. And then my final slide is in terms of faculty. And a lot of times people are curious about what the market for faculty is like. So we have 3,700 something faculty. And the faculty are the people who make the education happen. Many of those faculty are tenure track faculty, some of them are fixed term faculty. A relatively smaller number are part-time faculty. You may have read stories about people who are a variety of part-time faculty jobs. We actually don't do a lot of that. We do some, but far fewer than a lot of other universities. And so these statistics are for what we refer to as tenure track faculty who may be tenured or may not yet be tenured in the case of assistant professors. And you can see that here our salaries relative to our peers are relatively low. If you do a correction for cost of living, they go up a little bit depending on what correction you do. Chapel Hill itself is a relatively expensive place to live by almost any standard. But remember, look at where some of the schools are that we're comparing ourselves to, though. San Francisco, Philadelphia, which are really high-priced kind of places. So we have relatively low salaries for full professors, lower salaries for associate professors, and really low salaries for assistant professors. And the challenge here really goes back to the tuition slide, because for the most part, tuition and state money in general, those are the 2 big contributors to how we can pay faculty. And the state of North Carolina has historically been very, very generous to the University of North Carolina and still remains generous, but our support from the state has dropped by about $50 million a year, or about 10% over the last few years. And furthermore, our ability to increase tuition has been really dramatically constrained. So now when we accept a student to the university, we can no longer raise their tuition for the time that they're here. So we get to adjust tuition by, I think it's 2% for each entering class. So we have some financial problems. The challenge is we can set the tuition low, but the faculty market is a national and even international market, and there's no separate market for public schools. So we have very, very low tuition, but we're competing with the Penns and the Harvards and so on for our faculty. And we're trying very much to try and find solutions to that so that we can remain a vital institution, that we can attract the best faculty and retain the best faculty. I will say, and this will be my last comment, that we have done a really nice job with faculty retention over the last few years. We've put a fair amount of money into it. When faculty get an offer, which may be 10, 20, 50, 75, even $100,000 more than we're paying someone, we try to find a way, if not to match the offer, then at least to put some money on the table to try and get people to stay. And we've had a lot of success. We've probably kept 80 to 90% of the people who were thinking of leaving, which tells you that people and faculty aren't just in it for the money, that there's something about Carolina that keeps them here even if we're not paying the highest salary. So we can explore more of that with your questions if you'd like to. And at this point, I will be turning it over to Rachel. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so as mentioned, I've been here less than a year, but there definitely is something about Carolina that is special and unique, and I thank you for including me in this esteemed company and letting me speak about how giving aid to students helps preserve the quality of and the character of Carolina. So why do we invest in student aid? And partly that's because of the deep public mission of the school, and I think people like me are so attracted to that and think of ourselves in a lot of ways as do-gooders and having big hearts, but it's a lot more than that. It really helps us attract and keep the best students. It helps us reward the brightest students. It helps us remove financial barriers for everyone. And I hope the faculty that are with me would agree that having really interesting, high-quality students makes their jobs more fun and makes Carolina a more attractive place, and is part of the reason we're successful in retaining those faculty. So just to illustrate, sometimes, again, we think about need-based aid as some form of charity, but actually it helps us retain the best class. So if we take a look, and I'm sorry I don't have a more recent data set in this slide set, but this would be a typical entering class. Fall 13 wasn't that different than this year, and here's our wonderful students. A whole bunch of them, more than 3/4 were in the top 10% of their class. A good percent were ranked top 10. A good percent, 14% were either first or second in their class. And they had pretty good diversity also, right? A lot of first-generation college students and a lot of students of color. And say we take away the students that we paid for with need-based aid or that we helped out with need-based aid, and we just replace them with the next people in line for admission, all of those statistics go down, not just the ones on the bottom about first generation or about diversity, but fewer people in the top 10%, fewer people in the top 10 of their class. Every quality statistic that we generally measure goes down when we don't have sufficient need-based aid. And I think it's important to remember that. It's good for Carolina. It's obviously good for those individual students, but it's also good for all the students they're in class with, for the staff, for the faculty, everyone, that we remain committed to meeting the financial need and we are able to admit our class without looking at the means of their parents. Why is this so important that we educate people? This is just a slide about how the economy has changed. So, you know, a while ago, I can't read the slide, you're right. Manufacturing, for instance, was one of our top industries. And other industries that didn't necessarily take higher education ranked way up there. And that's just not true anymore about our economy. If you look at the size of those bubbles, a lot of our economy and our economic needs have shifted to healthcare and other industries that take a lot of training, right? Educational services, professional and scientific management is up there as a big one. Manufacturing's still there, but it makes up a lot less of the economy. So it helps all of us, and it helps drive the economy of the state if we have well-educated people in North Carolina. And the wage bonus of having a bachelor's degree or higher has almost doubled from about 50% to over 100%. But in the meantime, there's a lot of public stories and a lot of public trust in universities is slipping a little bit. Those stories about $1.3 trillion in debt and people with 200,000 working as a barista can sometimes dominate the narrative, even though that has nothing to do with who we are at Carolina. And as such, across the board pretty much, you can see that state support for public institutions is slipping. Luckily, it's not slipping as much in this state as in many others, but it still creates a resource issue for us, especially with also having our tuition restrained. So how are we doing? We're actually doing pretty well, at least for now. It is true that in the aftermath of the Great Recession and sort of continuing, a larger percentage of our class needs need-based aid. And so nearly half, around 43 to 45% of our students are receiving some sort of need-based aid at the undergraduate level. And that puts a strain on our resources. But the kind of aid we're able to give them is actually pretty good. So only about 28% is something that we in the industry like to call self-help. Sounds very help yourself, which is what it is. It's you're either borrowing to pay back later or doing work study to earn a little money while you're going to school. And over 70% are various forms of grants and scholarships, either from the federal government, the state government, private donations, or the really big light green box, which is UNC grants that come out of tuition and other revenue sources. But to be sustainable into the future, given our restraint on tuition, we'd really love to change the size of the boxes so that white private donation box grows and the light green box stays the same or shrinks a little bit so that we can fund other high priorities in the university. And this is really where our future is going to be, is can we, in this capital campaign, really make a sustainable path forward into the future for students and our other priorities. I won't belabor that. And then I just want to look at that $1.3 trillion debt a little differently. So for us in Carolina, we're doing well in measuring student debt no matter how you look at it. The very dark blue, almost dookie color, is all public, 4-year public and privates, The medium blue is all four-year publics, and the Carolina blue, or as close as my PowerPoint would get to it, is us. And if you look over time, the left-hand higher sets of bars is how undergraduate student debt tends to be measured, which is the average debt of those who borrow. But the lower right-hand set of bars is actually the average debt per undergraduate who receives a bachelor's degree. And because only about 2 in 5 of our undergraduates have to borrow at all, you can see we're dramatically lower than the national average, and that per degree amount is actually less than 1 year's tuition and fees. So that's something that I think we can be pretty proud of. And now, because she's much more interesting than I am, I thought it would be fun to hear from a student about the impact that student aid had on them. So if we can play the video, I will stop talking.
To me, the Covenant Scholarship is so much more than money. It's love, it's the ability to call UNC my home, it's mentorship, it's my books for a semester, it's support for a summer internship, it's community, it's the ability to study abroad in Sevilla, Spain. And thanks to the Covenant, I'm the first in my family to go to college, the first to leave the country, and in a few years, I'll be the first lawyer.
So thanks to students like that and alumni like you, I'm really excited and proud to be continuing on these great traditions at Carolina, and I will turn it over to Kevin.
Great. Thank you. This has been the view outside of my window at the South Building for the past week or so, and I hope that on Sunday when you're all in your Carolina blue caps and gowns that you might go over and take a photo at the old well. But it's there's a line usually starting about 7:30 in the morning this time of year for everybody to get that last photo outside the old well or off the front steps of the South Building. So again, thank you all for being here, and I hope it'll be a fun weekend for you. Want to just share a little bit. I've been asked to talk a little bit about just education and research at Carolina, and I'm going to, while a lot of what I want to share here speaks more to the College of Arts and Sciences, which is the college or the school in which I oversee, a lot of this transcends to the university at large. And just a few fun facts and figures here. You can see from these numbers that the majority of undergraduate students at Carolina are in the College of Arts and Sciences, just as you might expect, and all students enter the college when they come to Carolina and spend their first 2 years there, and then some go on to the professional schools. But about 3 out of every 4 students at Carolina, undergraduate students that'll be graduating on Sunday, have degrees from one of our 40 departments in the College of Arts and Sciences, which constitutes about 70 plus different programs or degree options. And likewise with graduate students, we have about 1 in 4 of the graduate students at Carolina are in the College of Arts and Sciences. There are now 1,000 faculty in the College of Arts and Sciences, and if you think back to how many faculty there may have been in 1967 when you were graduating, I'm certain that it was much smaller than that. The college faculty teach about 85% of the undergraduate credit hours, and the photo, just a couple photos here that we've put in here. Up in the upper right-hand corner is Jody Magnus. She's one of our star faculty on an archaeological dig in the Holy Land, surrounded by Carolina students that are helping her in her research. We have a program in entrepreneurship, and so there's a picture of our students that are studying out at Google and at their headquarters in California. And in the bottom right-hand photo is one of our undergraduate research symposium that we had just a few weeks ago. And in the middle is our fluids lab. This is a 36-meter wave tank where researchers in marine sciences, biology, and applied mathematics actually are helping to solve problems such as oil spills in the Gulf that we had several years ago. And so it's just looking at beach erosion. So just showing you a little bit of the breadth here. The university brings in about $900 million in research grants a year, and a little over $100 million of that comes from faculty in the College of Arts and Sciences. There we go. Just a few highlights in terms of graduate program rankings. These are programs in the College of Arts and Sciences that are ranked in the top 30 by U.S. News and World Report. We're big on metrics, and we want to sort of know where we stand as we're thinking about where we want to be recruiting faculty and bringing in star graduate students. But if I put up all of the programs across the university, including those from public health and the School of Medicine and pharmacy and others, I wouldn't be able to fit them all on this screen. We have amazing departments, and recognize that these are out of roughly about 330 universities that could have been in these rankings, and so many of these programs are represented here. Just U.S. News and World Report does not rank every subject area. One of those that's not there is philosophy. There may be some philosophy majors in the audience here. It's a top-ranked department, but the U.S. News and World Report does not rank them, as well as classics. We have a world-renowned classics department, and they specialize in archaeology. And recently, our dramatic art department has recently reached the top 25 for our Masters in Fine Arts programs in their rankings. So we're proud of these rankings, and we continue to, again, be focused on recruiting the very best faculty at Carolina, retaining the best faculty, so that we can continue to climb in these rankings. Just a few things. I became Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences in January of 2016, and one of the things that I set out to do very early was to reimagine the arts and sciences. The liberal arts has been under attack in some ways over the past decade, and it's part of our fabric here. We still have a very robust general education curriculum that allows our students to have the breadth across many disciplines through the general core curriculum, depth within the chosen discipline or major that a student would choose, and then practice is the third part of that I would add. A lot of our work now is focused on experiential education and a more hands-on approach to learning. We're teaching a course the past 2 years on seafood forensics, where we have our students in biology and chemistry are doing DNA testing on seafood that's purchased in grocery stores, because a lot of the seafood that's purchased is mislabeled. And so this is just one example of sort of a hands-on experiential education course that's now being taught. The new mission statement for the college, which we sort of unveiled back in the fall, is very simple, and it's you can see it on the this is the front page of our College of Arts and Sciences website, and our new mission statement is think, communicate, collaborate, create for meaningful lives. And I think it speaks to us being proud to be the most public of the public universities. We're proud of the ways in which we align with that. And we also are preparing students for multiple careers in a lifetime, and so we're proud of this. One of the, through our recent strategic planning initiative, one of the priorities that emerged from this, and when Provost Dean asked me to take on this job as Dean of the college, we knew that we were going to need to revamp our general education curriculum. The current curriculum is about 11 years old, and so we've been working over the past year to reimagine or rethink that core curriculum. But one of our priorities is to develop a more contemporary, innovative, and inclusive curriculum. We have 8 task forces that are currently working and actually delivering a report to us within the next week on the next steps of this. And I do imagine we're going to see more experiential education, more on entrepreneurship, and a lot around those 4 areas that I mentioned with our current mission statement. Courses are going to allow our students to become the best thinkers, communicators, collaborators, and scholars that can create new things, whether it's research or art or music. So we're very proud of this. This picture shows a scaled-up classroom, very different from the old standard classrooms you may have sat in back in the mid to late 60s. But these are small working groups. We have rebuilt our classrooms to look more like this. We have 5 new classrooms that are built like this, where we can allow students to learn in a more problem-solving environment, where a professor might put a problem set down in the middle of a table and have them work as a group on solving that problem based on the theory which they may have learned a class before. We have a new quality enhancement plan, which is focused on teaching science courses in a different way, and this This is a picture here of the front page of the Quality Enhancement Plan that was put before our SACS accreditation team just about a month and a half ago, but it's called Creating Scientists, Learning by Connecting, Doing, and Making. We have new maker spaces. This is taken from our maker space, which is over in Murray Hall, which is not far from where old Venable Hall would have been when you were here. And if you have an opportunity to walk through there, I really encourage you to check it out, but it has everything from 3D printers to laser cutters to lathes, and it looks more like a wood shop, and high-end sewing machines, and we're basically teaching our students to take the theory and bridging it to a more applied approach to learn how to make things. Just a few more slides here, but another priority is to really try to help encourage the success of our underrepresented students on our campus. And we have amazing projects. This is Kelley Hogan here on the left-hand side of this slide. Kelley is one of the leading scholars in the country on what we call high structure active learning, where we are flipping the classroom, having students watch a video perhaps the evening before, and then more problem-solving approach in the classroom the day after. We have a Chancellor Science Scholars Program that brings in students from underrepresented backgrounds, about 40 a year, to put them on a path to succeed and to move into the sciences and into health affairs, medical school over their 4-year period at Carolina. And we're graduating our first class of Chancellor Science Scholar students, 34 students, primarily first-generation college students, Black and Latina students will be graduating from this group on Sunday. We have an Office of Instructional Innovation where we're working again with Kelley Hogan and others, and we've closed the achievement gap through these new innovative instructional methods in our Gateway Science classes, whereby women who traditionally have not pursued the sciences are now succeeding in these Gateway Science classes because of these new methods. When we've nearly closed the gap for achievement in biology, chemistry, and physics classes for our Black students and Latino students. So just a few areas where Carolina is leading. And then finally, just on expanding our high impact and interdisciplinary research. This is, again, another priority for us through our strategic planning within the college. And I've just added a few of these, and again, I could have given you an entire presentation on just high impact research, but in the upper left hand slide here, this is Kathleen Harris. Kathy has led our AD Health study. This is the largest national study on adolescent behavior. It's funded by the NIH, and it's been going on since 1994, studying longitudinally the lifestyles of children who are now well into their early 20s, mid-20s. And so it's a longitudinal study, and Kathleen's work has been highlighted in New York Times, Washington Post, and Time Magazine. Our computer science department's leading the way in robotics and 3D virtual reality. And up in the upper right-hand corner, our psychology and neuroscience department does amazing work in studying addiction and memory loss. These are two of their primary areas. And then some work in digital humanities. This is a project down in the center of the slide looking at Lorraine Mills, which is using digital technology. We'd shown how to preserve and promote a region of the state's history through this project. And then the football helmet, I couldn't pass this one up, but my own work is in the area of sport concussion. A lot of my own research and my team's research takes place down on this football field behind us, where we're studying the long-term effects of repeated concussion, and we just received a $2.6 million grant this past week to continue that work. And so I'm going to stop there, and hopefully that provides some highlights for you of some of the educational initiatives and research programs that have been funded at the university over the past few years. Thank you.
Well, super. Thanks, Dean Guskiewicz, and I'm really honored to be here talking to all of you alumni and to give you hopefully some insight from my perspective on what it takes to preserve a great university. But I'm just going to start out by telling you that I have such distinguished panelists up here that the quality of the presentation you're going to hear from me is just going to drop precipitously. And I'm going to explain why. But you know, I've been here for a long time, lived about 80% of my life here in North Carolina, and as I've been in the faculty every day and every year, I just try to do one thing useful that day. And today what I did was, I was so interested in my colleagues' slides, I printed them all out, not knowing they might actually help them. Read the slides. That's about all I'm going to do today that matters. Everything else is gravy. Then the other is I really want to thank the General Alumni Association, our beloved Doug Dibbert and Catherine Nichols for the opportunity to be up here. But I'm really surprised that Doug allowed this to happen, because he knows I go off the rails all the time. And so I don't know if that was a deal that the provost and Doug had, but to let me be up here. And the other thing is, while they made me go last, in order to control how much time I talk, Jim. so Jim, I was just going to say, but he kind of ruined my last line there. He's so far away from me that he can't give me the hook, but I'm sure he trusts Kevin to do it as necessary. So all of you in this audience are wondering, do the faculty at the University of North Carolina of Chapel Hill understand what it means to preserve a great university, given, I will call, our troubles? You all wonder that. I hope we don't spend a lot of time on it, but I will reassure you that the answer is yes. And I can talk about why that is and explain why it's so important. But foundationally, the faculty are responsible for most of the things that you've heard, and I agree with Rachel that the students are so important to us doing our job well. But if we're going to claim credit, then we better claim responsibility. And that has been an important discussion that we have had at the faculty, and I would submit to you that it's what's required in order to ensure that you're fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility to the students, to the state, to the alumni, and to who you are yourself. So now I'm going to tell you my life story, history. Where's that watch? So my father came here in '73, and he was a psychology professor, started the Center for Developmental Science. When I graduated high school in 1981, I didn't come here, much to my regret, because I didn't understand what it had to offer. So I finally wised up, and we're a Carolina family. I have a daughter who graduated here and now is in medical school, a son who's a second year, and then my third child is joining the class of 2021, and I have a 14-year-old that I'm sure will wear Carolina blue. But I remember talking to my father in the late 70s because he got a letter from Harvard. And they offered him the sun, moon, and the stars, and I read it. It was on that thick paper with that fancy emblem, and I thought, well, why aren't we moving to Massachusetts? This is the greatest opportunity as a kid would ever imagine. He goes, Bruce, I want you to remember something. It's not where you are, it's what you do that matters. And that really is the foundation of why this is such a great university. I'm sure you all have your own story, but this is, as Charles Kuralt said, a public university, a university of the people. And we've talked about what does that mean, in terms of financial support. To me, it's not really about that. For 100 years of our history, we didn't get any support from the state. It's about that commitment to the people. But more importantly, in 2017, look at the problems we have in the world. Who's going to solve them? It's not a public university. We run towards those challenges. We don't run away. And so the faculty here want to pursue elite work, win Nobel Prize, but don't act elitist. Because it's critically important, if you're going to be and help North Carolina, you can talk to the people, that you're open-minded, that you're diverse in your thinking and in your being. The other advantage of Carolina is its broad range. We are one of the only places, if not the only place, that has all of the 15 schools, including the college and the centers and institutes, all in physically one location, best location in the world, southern part of heaven, but all really working together that allow for this interdisciplinary collaboration to work. And everything that Dean Guskiewicz talked about has filtered through the entire university. And the chancellor and the provost are creating an environment where we break down silos and we really pursue these challenging problems in a way not only have we not done, but I don't think anybody else in the world is doing. And so Carolina also and its faculty have a true commitment to academic principles and academic freedom. We disagree, you know this. We have this innovative teaching program, and I'm sure Dean Guskiewicz can talk some more about how we're changing the dynamics of teaching, accessibility, and pursuing those people who have a different story that can really enhance our global mission. I'm sure you all realize the place is so much different than it was back in 1967. At least I knew it was when I was mowing the lawns here in 1973. And I think it's been controlled and important growth. If you're not growing, you're shrinking. And then adaptability to challenge, as I already referred to. You're going to have challenges at a public university, but what you got to be able to do is figure out how to leverage your strengths to solve them and show others how to solve theirs as well. So why do I think like this after I left here and I trained here and came back? Well, I'm the director, as was mentioned, of the Burn Center. It was built by the people. They said there was a challenge. They wanted the university to solve it. And so it creates this unique relationship that I don't think other public universities have, that I know all of you sense who work and stayed here in North Carolina. And so it offers an incredible opportunity for collaboration, both within the institution and within the state and across the world. So what have we done in addition to what we're doing here in North Carolina? As was mentioned, we have a burn center in Malawi, Africa. And what we're learning about how to do this in austere environments, we work with the special forces on how you take care of burn patients in austere environments, just like we help the communities in rural North Carolina using telemedicine to decide whether to send their patients. So how does all this tie into being chair of the faculty? Well, ultimately, shared governance here is better than any other place I've ever seen. And shared governance is between the elected faculty, I'm the chair of the faculty, and we have about 10% of our faculty are involved in faculty governance, and then the leadership of the university, the provost and the chancellor, who have been more supportive than any other leadership I've also seen. And then the partnership with the board of trustees as well as the board of governors and so forth, and including Dean Guskiewicz, because there's another aspect of all of this is administrative governance. So who do you hire? Who's your chair? Who's your dean? All of these things interface to resolve conflict. Maybe not solve a problem, but create an environment where people feel like they can work together. Why does this matter for the faculty? Maybe we can get into some of this. The demographics of the faculty are changing. Over 50% of our faculty now, I believe, are fixed term, because the tenure track line, just in general, is eliminating. And what it does, though, is create enormous opportunity for us who can understand that change, take advantage of it, have respect and collaboration between the different lines. We've already mentioned diversity and its importance. I will tell you, I've seen so many times when people are myopic about what they think the future is and they think they have the answer and don't want to bring in other ideas or other kinds of people, it doesn't work. It doesn't solve their problem. And it's against our mission. So in faculty governance, we've talked about faculty welfare. What are the issues that we need to address to help recruit and retain people? Gender issues, the Committee on the Status of Women, making sure that we're in compliance with the law, a very important part of what we do, and really having discussions with the students and the staff when society starts to tear itself apart. I don't need to mention all of those things. I'm sure all of you are aware. Public university is where we can address this. So again, as I mentioned, I really appreciate the opportunity to be up here and work with my colleagues, and Provost Dean's leadership has been outstanding, as has been our chancellor. But when I think about what makes us a great place and a great faculty, it's, as was mentioned, our students and our community and all of you, our alumni. Because your support, your interest, your oversight, and your engagement involvement is what makes sure that we will preserve this grace asset now and into the future. So, thank you.
So let's just thank all of our panelists for their time.
You can give Provost his watch back.
That's a nice watch.
You can have one too from the bookstore. It says NC on it. Catherine, so are you doing cards, or how are we going to do it?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Andy, why don't you ask one question on the panel, and if anyone has questions that they want to ask, could you write them down on cards, and if you need a card, you let me know, I'll pass them out. Is that okay?
We're really interested in your questions. Make them hard, too.
Yeah, people are looking for the cards. While we're waiting for the cards, I'll maybe just answer one question just out loud, if that's okay. Does anybody have a question I can? Yes.
We talked earlier about the faculty pay and that was low. The question I have relates to that, which is, can faculty do outside consulting to supplement their incomes? And if yes, what is the university doing to help them find consulting opportunities?
Okay, so the observation was going back to the slide I showed about relatively low faculty pay compared to our peers. And the question was, can faculty augment their income by doing outside consulting? And if yes, what is the university doing to try and facilitate that? Is that a good summary? Okay. So yes, faculty certainly have the opportunity to do outside work, which could be consulting. In the world that I come from, the business school world, consulting would be an obvious thing to do. It could be in other disciplines, other teaching opportunities. It could be expert witness work, for example, if you're an expert in something. Those are probably some of the main categories. And so yes, this is allowed up to a point. We have a policy called the policy of conflict and commitment, which in the first instance says that you can't do so much outside work that it begins to interfere with your academic work. And so for all of us, including me, if we do outside work, so I'm in one board that is for money, that I get paid to do. And so every year I have to ask permission from my boss to be able to do that, as does everyone else in the university. And so that's the conflict of commitment. And then there's a conflict of interest. And that mostly comes into where people are on boards or participating in startups or otherwise engaged in business activities that might create a conflict of interest, for example, around intellectual property. So we have a pretty solid set of policies to try and address that so that people are allowed to do things but do it within certain ramifications. I would say the university doesn't particularly facilitate that. And it's probably also worth saying that, for example, within Kevin's unit, the College of Arts and Sciences, there are some departments where faculty would probably frequently be called upon to do things that were for pay, and other departments where it's much less likely.
The reason I say facilitate, for example, many of the faculty could be asked to do speaking engagements which are short-term. They don't necessarily, they're much easier to manage than other things, but it needs university support to find those engagements and to get the word out there that there are good people available.
May I make a comment?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I think it's a good question. The challenge,
Repeat the question.
well, the question that's being asked is, can you enhance salaries, particularly for junior faculty, and it was on the tenure track, by doing outside work? The challenge is, and this, the only reason I want to make a comment is because this came up in faculty assembly, which is the larger system issues, and it's a very complicated question, actually, both within the university and state law. But the bigger point is that many of these faculty are at vulnerable positions. So they're really trying to make their mark in their discipline. And these are ones that we had talked about earlier, whether or not the humanities matter or not. And it's not as if the large paying sort of options that are available are very lucrative in those roles. Usually the people that you're talking about are ones that are already established and can kind of go wherever they want. There's a high competition for this. And so the other is that they really want to focus on their academic career. And so what ends up happening is that you have some of the best and the brightest and the most motivated getting demoralized because they don't really want to be about money. They want to be about being able to move forward. And that's where that relationship between the state or the constituencies, it's the taxpayers, and the university becomes relevant, or where these development initiatives for donation to support faculty in these disciplines. That's how you stay great.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Catherine, do you have a question?
Yeah, what percentage of UNC costs are provided by North Carolina state government, and has this changed recently?
It depends on the type. So the question was, what percentage of the costs? Catherine, is it for an individual student or for the university as a whole?
It was not indicated.
Okay, well, let me answer it both ways then. For an individual student, the vast majority of the costs of, for example, an undergraduate resident student are covered by the state. So the amount of transfer of money that comes from the state for undergraduate resident students is close to the cost of education that we provide. For out-of-state students, it's a small fraction of the the subsidy is a small fraction of the costs associated with that. So the state has a very clear policy that they want us to educate students within the state first and foremost. You may know that there's an agreement that the university educates that for the first year undergraduate class, the percentage of students who must come from in-state is 82%. So the vast majority of students come from within North Carolina. To answer the question a different way, in terms of the overall budget of the university is about $3 billion. That's if you do not count UNC Healthcare. If you count UNC Healthcare, it's about twice that, about $6 billion. But if you take the $3 billion base, the support that comes from the state of North Carolina is about $450 million. So it's somewhere just south of 1/6.
The next question is, what is your admission quota to attain social diversity, or I'm sorry, racial diversity now?
Well, so first of all, we do not have quotas. The law of the United States of America, as interpreted by the Supreme Court of the United States, does not allow us to have quotas. We do have a very diverse student body, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. We try to make sure that we have a diverse student body, but it's simply not attained by having quotas. That would be illegal.
This is a longer one. My mother had 2 degrees from UNC. When she was creating her living trust, I asked her if she was leaving money for UNC from her estate, and she said no. I was shocked, but didn't push it further. Does UNC track the money received from transfer from estates of alumni? Estate alumni. It's more of a development question as far as tracking money received from alumni in their estates.
Can you ask the gentleman to clarify the question? I'm not sure I'm getting it. Do we track?
Yeah, do you track the amount of money that comes into UNC from alum who leave money to UNC in their estates?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
I mean, I'm just curious, is that a sizable amount, or how does it compare with other universities? And,
Yeah,
you know, would there be a way for UNC to try to, I mean, it's a touchy way to go about it, but, you know, ask alumni, hey, when you're developing your living trust, you know, why don't you think about leaving some money to Carolina?
So we definitely do that, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
So you do. I would be surprised if any one of you hasn't gotten at least one communication from us along. There's hands raised all over the room, so we need to get your email address or something to make sure that. No, and in fact, we have certain individuals. So we have an organization within the university, advancement and development, that are in the business of fundraising, and because we get, as I said, about $450 million out of about a $3 billion budget from the state. Some of that gap is made up through philanthropy, and we would not be the university we are. We would not be anywhere close to the university we are without the contributions of alumni. And they come in a wide variety of ways. They come from expendable grants, they come from endowments, and they come from estate gifts. And we have several people within the development organization whose area of expertise is exactly the design and execution of gifts that are given that way. And now I'm right about at the edge of what I know and what I don't know, but there are a lot of technical ways to try and do that. Various kinds of charitable trusts that allow you to get income before you pass away and so on. But yeah, rest assured, we do a lot of that. So thank you for that. Other questions, Catherine, or should I go to hands? Okay.
I've got one more. What would you like to see UNC do to continue to flourish?
Okay, I've been answering all the questions, so I'm going to ask my colleagues to do that. And I'll have an answer too, but Kevin, you want to start that one?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think we have a new strategic framework for the university, which is has 2 pillars of it. One is of the public for the public. The second is innovation made fundamental. And then the strategic plan that we've just finished within the College of Arts and Sciences really aligns nicely with it, which is around, expanding high impact research, which I touched on briefly, creating a new contemporary, innovative, and inclusive curriculum, and global's a part of that. And I think that we need to, I tell people that sometimes, we have these rich traditions at Carolina, which we want to embrace, but yet sometimes we're afraid to step out and become a more contemporary thinking university. And I think the innovation made fundamental is going to really challenge us to do that. We're thinking about, as an example, UNC Chapel Hill does not have a College of Engineering, but yet we show up regularly in the top 10, if not top 7, in research expenditures in a given year against a lot of other universities who have a School of Engineering or a College of Engineering, but we're doing it in really unique ways. So I want to build out our applied sciences and biomedical engineering and bridge it with the School of Medicine and the School of Pharmacy and Public Health and Keenan Flagler. And we need more interdisciplinary endeavors that I think are going to differentiate Carolina along those two lines of innovation made fundamental and of the public for the public, because we can have amazing technology transfers and commercializing the scientific discoveries that will help the state of North Carolina.
Rachel, do you want to talk about it from a student standpoint and an age standpoint?
I mean, I just got here, so I'm already impressed with the degree to which faculty and others are looking at innovative curriculum and how to really teach students well. I'd say for me, it's important that we continue to create wonderful classes of graduates who are ready to go out and thrive in the world, change the world, and make it a better place. And to me, that means, one, that everyone who can earn their admission here, can afford to go here, and also that there's no second-class Carolina experience for those students, so they can experience all those rich enhancement opportunities, that they can have an internship, that they can have the opportunity to innovate and become entrepreneurs in whatever interests them.
If I can just add one thing, and I'm going to quote the provost here, because I've quoted him a few times on this because I really like this thinking, and I've challenged some of our faculty as we're thinking about our new curriculum. I heard Provost Dean a few months ago say that, do you realize that the students that we're educating today are going to be retiring around the year 2065? I believe you said that. And so we're thinking about preparing our graduates for careers that we don't even know what they are yet today. And so we need to be out ahead of the game. I use this Wayne Gretzky quote all the time. He talked about, why was he such a great hockey player? And he says, well, it wasn't because I was a great skater. I didn't skate very well with the puck, but I knew where the puck was going to be on the ice, and I got to that spot so somebody could pass it to me. So we want to be where the puck's going to be as we develop our new curricula and think about our research initiatives.
I would just say very briefly, keep doing what we're doing. Both Kevin and Jim and other colleagues are so much more articulate about what we're doing, and I'm very proud of where we are and where we're going. I'll let maybe Jim expand on that.
I won't say much more. I mean, I think we're all very much on the same page. One of the phrases that's come out of our strategic framework effort is no barriers to a great education. And that, for me, really characterizes a lot of what we're trying to accomplish here. There should be no barrier associated with money, with income, with ability to pay, which is what Rachel and her colleagues worry about. There should be no barrier based on any kind of demographic characteristic. I mean, one of the great things, and you've been part of this, one of the great things about this university for over 2 centuries is that people have come from every corner of North Carolina, united by some academic ability and a desire to succeed. And there's story after story after story of people who washed dishes in a fraternity or did this or did that in order to be able to pay what, in retrospect, feels like relatively modest tuition. But they were willing to work hard, and I think that no barriers really captures it, that if someone wants to come, whatever their background is, whether they're an nth generation Carolina alum family or whether they're a first generation college student at all, that if they're willing, if they've got the academic ability and they're willing to come here and work hard, we can help them to be successful. So that no barriers captures it for me.
So this question is, given the pace of technological change, is the facilities budget adequate to expose students to the most up-to-date technical equipment? Environment.
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's an insightful question. It's a challenge. So the technology falls into a bunch of different categories. There's classroom technology, and we're in the midst of trying to transform the classrooms to keep up with our faculty. I mean, Kevin alluded to the new ways that we're teaching. There's a building on campus called Greenlaw, which was apparently built in the 1970s from the looks of it. That's not meant to be a compliment to Greenlaw. And yet within it, we've created one of the most modern and really incredible classrooms that you've ever seen. And I don't know what kind of free time you have, but Green Law 101 is worth going and looking into. Tables all over the place, screens all over the place, chairs that swivel, students can group, ungroup. And if you see the before picture of that, you see that it just looked like an auditorium, the way that auditoriums look. And so we are continuing to invest in classrooms to be updated, and that's one type of technology. And part of our capital campaign is to invest in those classrooms so that we have the physical settings. The students the students, undergraduate students are required to have laptops, and we have, that's probably, Rachel, is part of their package, right? If the students don't have the money to do those, so we do sort of okay there. One area where we have a challenge in technology is actually for faculty as much as it is for students, because we compete at the very high end, and maybe Bruce can comment on this as well, the very high end of medical research and biomedical research. Sometimes the equipment that we need is just almost unimaginably expensive, and it's really challenging to put the money together to be able to do that. There's a particular type of imaging technology that we really need for our researchers, particularly in the medical school, that we don't have now because we simply can't afford it. So that would be a challenge as well. Bruce, any thoughts about that, or Kevin?
No, I would just say I agree. It's a challenge, and in fact, Kevin, I think, has a broader range of specifically how are we supposed to try to fix this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything Jim said regarding technology. The area where I think we're struggling the most is around renovation of old buildings, and we used to receive significantly more funding from the state of North Carolina for the maintenance and upkeep of our buildings. And again, in the college, we have 53 buildings, and I will tell you that probably 40 of them are in desperate need of some repair and renovation, and we just receive significantly less from the state in that regard. And so if you know anybody in the legislature that sits on that committee for renovation, R&R fund, that's what we need more of.
Right. So that's a great question. Thank you for that. Catherine?
Is UNC reaching more low-wealth students than in years past?
I think in general that's true, partly just because of the recession that the state and the country went through. There are more people in that category. I'm not sure that we're reaching them intentionally. We don't pay attention to the means of students when they apply, but I think it's actually a great thing that we can support them once they're here, and we have seen that percent of our undergraduate population go up.
Rachel, can you mention two things? I think it would be really helpful. Can you talk about need-blind admissions, and can you talk about the covenant?
I can. Those are two great things to talk about. So the first thing, need-blind admission simply means that we read everyone's admission application without knowing anything about their wealth or status or ability to pay, and we don't use that as a factor in deciding who to admit. We just admit the best class we can that we think the students make the best fit to Carolina. And then afterwards, Steve Farmer, our director of admissions, hands those students over to us and says, now help these kids who need it pay for it. And that's a wonderful position to be in, because you're not, risking any kind of, you're not having to make any Sophie's Choice type of situations, right? The Carolina Covenant is a really wonderful and unique program. One of the main reasons I was attracted to come to Carolina, which supports any student who is an undergraduate with a family background where the family income is less than double the poverty line, so that's still pretty low income, and offers them financial aid sufficient that they can graduate in 4 years without ever taking out a loan. So there's a little work-study component, partly because we believe that work-study jobs enhance their experience and their ability to go get a job and change the world and all that when they leave. And then the rest is all covered in grants and scholarships. But even more than that, it provides all kinds of success support to students. So they each get a faculty mentor, they each get a peer mentor. There's community space in our building for them to come when they're having any issues. There's tutoring, there's test prep for graduate school, there's arts and sciences experience, particularly in the performing arts, vouchers to go do things. There's evenings with alumni to ask about career opportunities. There's evening dinner with faculty, and I'll stop talking because I could go on forever about it. But it has incredibly enhanced the success of those students from lowest income backgrounds, and particularly first generation. Their 4- and 6-year graduation rates that the provost was showing you before just were well behind other students, and they have jumped up to where, for most of them, they're graduating at nearly equal rates. So that's just something that we should all as a university be proud of.
And I really have to emphasize how different that is from national averages. I mean, that's really, really unusual. And to credit to Rachel and her colleagues and people in admissions and the university as a whole.
One more quick question. I think this will be quick. Why are students not required to live on campus for 2 years?
Why are students not required to live on campus for 2 years? I don't know. They're required to live on campus for 1 year. I don't actually know that we have enough dorms to have them live on campus for 2 years, so that might be a pretty good answer to that. I mean, because our occupancy is not 100%, but it's fairly high, and I'm trying to think through this. No, it wouldn't be double, because there's a lot of other opportunities for students, but I think it's probably just a matter of capacity. There was someone here, you had your hand up. Did you want to still ask your question? Here comes a microphone so everybody can hear you.
That graduation success rate among the Covenant students would not be happening without the support you're giving them, because those kids, a lot of them are not getting it at home, and they're just so out of the mainstream of what their families have done for a long time. And one of the things I was impressed with was that the coordinator for that part of the program keeps boxes and boxes of tissues in his office.
That is true.
And people know
Yes.
they can come
We have
in
a
and
tissue
sit
budget.
down and have a good cry if they need to. And it's my favorite thing to donate money to here at the university.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I do hope, and I know we're just about to the end of the session, but I don't know whether the program you have facilitates any contact with students who are here, and I know they've just finished exams and they're all over the place. Most of them are at the old well getting their picture taken, I think, relative to Kevin. But honestly, if you have a chance as you walk around campus to just stop a student or two and just ask them where they're from and what they're studying and what they're doing, I think you'll really be impressed. I mean, our best days, this group of people is incredibly committed to students. And our best days is when you just have a chance to talk and ask a student where he or she came from and what they're studying and what they hope to accomplish. Just this morning, I was at the red, white, and Carolina blue graduation ceremony, which is for our military students, either ROTC or veterans, and they get an honor cord that they can wear to graduation. And you listen to their stories, where they came from, the odds they overcame to get here. In the case of the veterans, have been on active duty. Some of them have been SEALs or equivalent in the other services. Others have come from single-parent houses in the inner city or out in the country. Some have come through community college, through the C-STEP program that allows community college students to get to Carolina. Every student has a great story, and they leave here, with this great thing that we share, being part of this incredible family of Carolina. And in just a couple of days, we're going to add several more thousand to that group to be part of your community. So thank you so much for coming this
Jim,
afternoon.
May I make one more observation before you close?
Should I give them the watch back?
I go
What
off
do
the
you think?
rails. You wouldn't expect it not to happen. I just want to say how incredibly impressed I am as chair of the faculty that all of you are here today, and that you're so thoughtful, and perhaps most importantly, that based on the questions that you've asked, that our concerns and thoughts and goals are aligned, which means we are well on our way to preserving this great university. And I just wanted to say that before Jim had a chance to close. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Bruce. So we'll stay around as we can for a few more minutes if you have one-on-one kind of questions, but if we could just thank our panelists for sharing time with us this afternoon.